In this video, I want to explore the principle of spatial navigation and intelligence. And what I want to suggest is that there's a way that a part of our body and a part of our brain that is connected to space is aware of something and certain truths and information inside of us that the lineal, logical part of our brain is not aware of and cannot directly access. So, what does that mean? Well, we have the left brain and the right brain traditionally, and it doesn't even matter as our brain science and our brain paradigm shift over time. We're developing more and more complex understandings of the different areas of our brain and what they do and how they relate to one another. But in the current paradigm, we have our left brain and our right brain, and we have a spatially intelligent brain, or more of a picture part of our brain, and then we have the logic part of our brain. So the logic says, 2 plus 2 is 4. The picture part of our brain is much more circuitous and, of course, less logical. It more says that there's a feeling over in this part of our memory or around this idea. And I want to describe a technique that I have been using with some admitted trepidation given the apparent inefficiency of the technique and all the judgments we have about, quote, wasting time. Yet these judgments come from the logical part of our brain, not the spatial part of our brain. And there is actually some good data to back this up. And one of the most compelling data for those of us with PTSD is in the work of constellation therapy. Now, in constellation therapy, what you do is that you have a group of people, it's maybe a circle of friends or just a circle of strangers, and you have a constellation facilitator, and then you have the subject, and you're the subject. And in constellation therapy, what you do is you enter a state of intention of working around a certain topic or issue. And you draw on the strangers around you and you say, okay, I want you to be my mom, I want you to be my sister, and I want you to be my dad. And then you use the spatial intuition that emerges in this context. Now, just watching this video, you may not get any intuition at all. But what happens when you are in this group with this intention is your spatial mind turns on. You don't have to do anything, it just turns on. And the facilitator says, where do you see your mom standing or being? And you're going to get an image. And you're going to say, oh, she's actually not standing, she's laying down and she's to my left. So then the character playing your mom goes and lays down to your left. And you say laying like this, laying like that, and then what's she feeling? What's she doing? You basically access the spatial intelligence, and you have these volunteers play out the picture that slowly takes shape in your mind. Now, as they do, feelings emerge, insights emerge that your logical brain did not and cannot access, but that are automatic when you are following the guidance and the language of the spatial part of the brain. Now, this is profoundly important to understand, that there is a part of our brain that can access material critical to healing trauma and PTSD that the logical part of our brain will never and cannot access, and certainly can't predictably access. In other words, if you sit the same person down, you're the subject and facilitator, and say, tell me the logic of your feelings, and have that logic change and transform so that you become a different person and enter a different state and have a different set of emotions, it's almost impossible for you to say, okay, 2 + 2 = 4, and that equals this, and that equals 10, and that equals, and end up with an equation that makes sense. Now, it is possible, meaning you can do lineal therapy, you can do talking, you can talk about cause and effect, and this is a valid and available resource. And yet, if we don't do spatially related work, there is an entire part of our brain that has access to knowledge with great elegance. Now, what do I mean by great elegance? Well, in 30 minutes, you can have breakthroughs that you might get to in a year of therapy, or you might not. So you have the ability to take these amazing shortcuts. And here's kind of how I want to explain it. Like, let's say the lineal equation of the map to well-being looks something like this. So the lineal equation goes, my mom did this, so then I felt this, so then my dad did this, and then I acted out this, and then I felt this, and then I felt this, and then that led to this, and then my sister did this, and then my dad did this, and then I felt this, and you can follow this map in a very plotting way, and it's an accurate equation through the lineal part of the brain. And thousands and thousands of interactions later, you get all the way along here. And you come back, back here. But if you look at this from a spatial angle rather than a logical angle, you say, ooh, there's a really close gap here. What would it take to get from here to here? Let's just jump over this fence here. Then let's go along logically over to here, and then let's jump over here. Now, it's these jumps that the spatial part of the brain reveals. In other words, if you were not looking at this drawing with your eyes, if you were looking at it as a mathematician, this would not make sense to you. Your eyes are accessing the spatial part of your brain. Now, making an effort to, let's say this is 3 months right here. And let's say this is 30 minutes right here. Making an effort to save that 3 months of time is pretty logical. If this is a long and winding road, and you can follow the highway and do all this, or you can take a little dirt road and connect and connect. And the potholes aren't too big, and you don't have to cross over any rivers. You just got a couple of 100 yards of driving along a little side street here. Are you going to feel smart to drive that side street? Well, of course you are. You're going to feel like the smartest person in the world. Like, did you know you can save, 3 whole months off of this road trip? You just drive over here, and you can save another, year and a half over here. And here's the entrance. There's no signs. There's not a sign saying, save 3 months off of the journey here. But it's obvious intuitively and instinctively through the picture part of the brain. So you're putting that power to work with you. You've still got the lineal logic. No, nothing down on that. And that may be the best thing to use. For example, when you're going from this location here all the way over to here, spatially it's about the same distance as it is with lineal logic. And the lineal logic makes you feel a little bit more sane, i.e., we've all been trained. Our lineal logic brain, which fits the current scientific paradigm. I highly recommend you look at Rupert Sheldrake's TED Talk, just to have a little fun poking at some of the scientific paradigms. But regardless of that, you're not going to get much faster using the picture brain or the scientific brain. You might be able to go through here and save off a week, but there's a lot of value. We like knowing cause and effect. We like, analyzing stuff and figuring out this led to this. We like that. And so when you've got this path or this path, why not use the lineal logic part of the brain? And and my mom did this, and then I felt shame, and then because she did it again, and then she punished me for feeling shame, and since that time I've always felt shame anytime this comes up. And oh yeah, okay, that all makes sense. It makes sense. Cause, effect, overlaid with therapeutic paradigms. It makes sense. Now these little road cuts do not make sense in the causal effect paradigm, because you're skipping all the cause effects all along here that do add up. You're just not following that path. Or maybe if you know they add up and you make this jump and you know that 3 months of work ends up here, you can speculate. Oh, I see. This is a shortcut, and this probably relates to blah, 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 blah. Now, you don't have necessarily, it's kind of the different, like when you do long division, 4 into 1.68, when you do the long division, you have endless calculations and you can verify it, or you can do a little shortcut and you can say, yeah, that seems about right. Now, you want to be able to do both. Sometimes you really want to check an equation, and other times not. But going back to this spatial part of the brain, number one, check out constellation therapy. And so that I'll leave it at that. But what I want to talk about is a way that I've been accessing the same part of the brain, and it's prototypal, meaning I'm still learning, the overall terrain of this approach, but it works like this. So we're looking at the spatial emotional intuitive brain. So I want to just kind of, by way of introducing this technique, talk a little bit about my day. So, woke up, did a little bit of writing, decided to go take a bath. On the way to the bathtub, decided to stop and do email. Did email, and then decided to take a bath. Walked towards the bathtub, changed my mind. Wanted to go out just wanted to go out after all that inward email stuff. Had an image of this lovely old woman who I just bought her a toilet seat. That was my fun giving gift 2 days ago, was she let me use her toilet in her restaurant. She's an old woman with a bit of a limp. And I imagine, because she's quite big, that even though it's relatively common in Thailand not to have a toilet seat, believe it or not, that's pretty common and they don't fuss about that, I thought it'd be nice if she had a toilet seat. So I'd given her a toilet seat, and that makes it more, so she kind of lit up in my mind as, let's go see her and see how she's doing. So I head off on my motorbike. Now, I'm pleased. I get to the motorbike, and then I realize I didn't bring my iPad. So I consider iPad or no iPad. I think, why not? iPad. Get the iPad. Now, I want to move, and it's actually Jen's getting the iPad. So I do 2 laps with the motorcycle around this little, I guess, a little circular road. I do 2 laps around this like 100-meter circle here. I feel great. So I wanted to move, I feel great. I move. I do 2 laps rather than wait, because I don't want to wait. So I'm kind of playing with these impulses. I drive to the restaurant. It's closed. It's like, okay, where's the next impulse? I decide to go on up the hill towards Big Buddha. Then when I slowly pass by each restaurant, just noticing yes or no, where's the impulse? When I get to one of them that has my favorite elephant, I decide to stop. Then I'm looking around for spatial intelligence again. I think, oh, let's get out the iPad. Where do I want to go? I go to, what was it? Best song in America and Britain's Got Talent on YouTube. So I went there, got lost in this music thing for about an hour, moved to tears. Then, while I'm listening to this beautiful singing in this beautiful view, I start getting all kinds of flashes of how I want my nonprofit to function. And it's like a whole world downloads. It's just like downloading images in this holographic thing where I see how all these relationships within thing work together, and I get really excited. And I don't want to move my body because I know it will interrupt the flow. So I ask Jen to get me a pad and paper, or paper and pen, which she does. And I write down notes. When I've written down all the notes, I listen to more songs. I feel really excited, so I want to move. I get on the motorbike. I decide to go downhill. I go downhill a couple hundred meters, then I feel like I've lost the scent. So I do a U-turn, go uphill a couple of meters. I feel like I've lost the scent again. So I go down and notice, like, where's the point I'm wanting to pause in between these two locations? Go to another restaurant. There, I talk briefly about my ideas with Jen, get excited again, want to go downhill again, then uphill, then another restaurant. By this time, I'm following the spatial, I guess, geography. And I'll tell you a little bit of the stuff that I do know, which is that it's not like it's an accident. Like when I'm doing the down and then up and then down again and then find the middle point, it's not like I should have gone here. It's like doing this and then this and then this and then this accesses a different part of my brain than just going here. So this is where logic and the logical part of many of our brains is having a fit. But having played around with this to see what is my body up to and why, I can assure you that the place you end up is not the same if you go directly there rather than here, then 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 here, and finally there. It is a completely different journey, and the destination is different based on the angles, the points, the time frame. Every nuance of the way there affects the part of ourselves that is accessed by arriving there. Now, this becomes much more obvious when you are aware that time is a dimension. So in one of the, in one of, like if you have this point here and you don't have the dimension of time, it looks like it's just this point and it's static. Now you add in the dimension of time and you realize that this point is like this, and you're spiraling around and you cross that intersection at certain periods of time, but by adding in the second axis, like if this depth doesn't exist, it looks like the same dot. You add in the dimension of time and it's not the same dot at all. It has echoes. There's an echo, but it is different. And this is, of course, just the best that our lineal logic can do to give logic to the non-linear part of our brain, the spatial part of the brain. Every part of us has a code, and every code has integrity with itself. Depending on the sophistication of, for example, our logic brain, something makes sense or it doesn't. You know, the entire history of humanity is rife with stuff being called idiotic. Like there's this whole cycle we've gone over in the whole last 100 years, with kind of in the midpoint, we had all this esoteric, mysticism and esoteric stuff that was kind of counter to science, around 100 years ago. And then the midpoint, we had science saying it's all bullshit. And then, 50 years later, around, 2000, there's more and more neuroscience, etc., that's saying that what was called mysticism over here is actually science. In other words, what's happening is the intuitive part of the brain and the logic part of the brain are intersecting, meaning the logical part of the brain has grown sophisticated enough at recognizing the dimensions that honor the intuitive part of the brain. And the intuitive part of the brain has always contributed a great deal to science, whether it's Einstein having, Einstein is actually a great example of taking a huge leap through a dream to profound linear science. So, the best scientists have always, that have made the biggest leaps, have always accessed the intuitive side. However, a lot of scientists have not been able to create a science of intuition. There's been an intuition of science. It's gone both ways. It's gone one way most of the time. And then the scientists, when they can't find the way back through science to intuition, just dismiss it. So it's kind of a little bit of a hypocritical relationship there. We'll take the science that intuition provides, but then we'll go ahead and dismiss the hand that fed us as being ridiculous. So it's a really rude relationship, actually, in traditional science of, we'll take everything that you give us and then we'll dismiss you as useless and unscientific. But that being as it may, back to this restaurant here, where I then write stuff down in much more detail, and I write it down visually using my image part of my brain about all these great charitable ideas, and I get really excited. Then I want to talk about it immediately, but I want to go about, but it doesn't feel right. So I take a slightly circuitous route. I go to another location. Then I sit down at one table and say a few things in that restaurant. Then I think, okay, I'm done at this table, so I think, of course, I'm going to leave the restaurant. No, I go towards the motorbike. Then I go back and sit at another table. Then I move to this other table and complete the conversation. So it's within the restaurant, we've got 3 tables basically. And then Jen's in a certain frame of mind, and I want to move her to a different frame of mind. Now I ask her, logic, what's up, Jen? Why are you distant right now? She doesn't know logically. My logical part has been blocked. I want to help her change state. I lift her up and I start carrying her. And the state changes. And I say, do you know why it changed? No, she doesn't. But she's in a completely different state. My carrying her accessed a shortcut in her brain, and it meant a bunch of things that I was carrying her, and it changed her state without her knowing why she was in the other state, or why she's in the new state, or why it changed. The action in a spatial sense, our bodies being in close proximity, the weight, the pressure, etc., shifted the state. So what does all this mean? It means that I've created some of the most important ideas of my life as a direct byproduct and in correlation with following a completely meandering back and forth flow of spatial intelligence throughout the day that led me to a place I never could have gotten. Like daily goals would never have gotten here. What's the quickest way to get to A to B would never have gotten there. What's the most efficient way to go to this intuitive place that I've had a picture of would not have gotten me there. What got me there was staying in integrity with this spatial back and forth, over and over, this, back, up, down, this, that, talk about this, now stop talking about this, in different ways, following this sense of flow. And it has arrived at this pot of gold that is non-linear, meaning my excitement about living is up about 280%. So that's linear. I'm doing the calcs, you know. So I've gotten a 280% sustainable and exciting upper by doing something that is completely irrational until we understand how much of our intelligence exists in the spatial and not spatial part of our brain. And if we understand that, it becomes completely irrational not to use it. In other words, if you've got a workforce of 100 employees and you're paying all 100 and you're only using 50 because the culture sanctions 50, and 50 over here are sitting doing nothing because the culture says these 50, for whatever weird reason, are useless. So the culture says these, are you going to pay 50 employees to sit and do nothing just because the culture says they are useless? Maybe the same absurdity that says women couldn't do what men can do and blah, blah, blah. Maybe these are the 50 women in the culture, metaphorically speaking, that the culture has wasted thousands of years not utilizing their intelligence because of its blind spot. Now, obviously, if you've got a business and you've got one business owner who's smart enough to fully utilize all 100 of their staff, let's say men and women, and the other business owner is such a cultural snob that they're paying all 100, because you don't have a choice to not send blood to half your brain, but is only utilizing 50% because it's a purist and blah, 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 and these are the only 50 that matter, and this stuff over here is just rubbish. Obviously, the employer who is smart enough, the business owner who's smart enough to use all the resources available for them, is going to advance exponentially faster than a business owner using 50% of their resources. This is just common sense. By this logic, not utilizing the spatial part of our brain, which, I mean, what I'm talking about is incredibly crude. Why? I've never been educated in spatial intelligence. There wasn't a single class in school that accessed and cultivated this part of my intuition and brain. Well, that's wasting real estate. We've got that part of our brain. It's untrained, and what I want to suggest is that it is actually highly logical to use the illogical part of our brain. That being said, what do you do? If you want to explore the field of trauma and healing in a new way, this is something for you to experiment around, gather data, and feel free to send it back to me. Let me know what you noticed, what happened. So here is the recipe. The recipe is logical. It's a logical recipe into the unlogical part of the brain. So 1, create a block of time. The bigger, the better. It's even better if you intuitively create the block of time or let it evolve. But definitely, if you have an appointment, get clear as to when that appointment is and know that you've got, until that time. So create a block of time or clarify the deadline. I'm lucky. My deadline is about 2 weeks from now. So, and that's not even hard and fast, but I've got to start looking at travel plans in a couple of weeks. But create a block of time. 2, set a resonant intention. I want to feel great. I want to have healing. I want to have a breakthrough. I want to have insight. I want to feel joy. Set a resonant intention, an emotional resonant intention. You need to, 3, get the scent. You get the scent of that resonant intention, i.e. if it's a spark of joy, if it's a sense of healing, you use the picture part of your brain to imagine things that have that feeling, and you take a moment to feel that feeling. So in my case, like this morning, it was a sense of joy and openness and peace and pleasure. There were a number of things, and I could just get the scent of that. It was like, new mown hay. It had that, I had a sense of the feeling. And then start moving your body. Now, a logical thing to do is to perhaps move towards one of those pictures. So for example, I started off with a picture of the woman I'd given the toilet seat. It immediately had that joy, the sense of her face, seeing my face. She was really grateful for the toilet seat. And so that had that scent to it. Get the scent. And then follow the scent. But follow it, not following attention to the logic. Don't lose the scent as you're moving your body. Stay present to the scent, not the logic. In other words, as soon as I had the picture of the woman, my logic brain wants to say, motorcycle, this road, woman, A to B, fast as possible. And tune out my intuition and my body knowledge. Just tune it out because I've made the decision and now I'm going to think about other things. That's the logic part of the brain trying to reassert itself. So have the image, be open to it, but stay present to the scent, the energy, body. By it being open to it, it's like, okay, I'm going to start walking towards, in this case, my chalet door, which is heading towards the motorbike. But as I get to the chalet door, I pause. And I wonder, why am I pausing? Have I forgotten something? It's like, oh yeah, the iPad. And then, not logically, it's more efficient to always carry your iPad. Why not? Yeah, that's there. But what's the scent? What's the impulse on a body level? And I thought, oh, it could go either way. But then it's like, no, it's a little brighter with that. It's a little brighter there. Okay, so let's do that. Now let's walk forward again. Okay, Is the scent, are we losing the scent? Are we gaining it? What's up? You follow the scent. It may disappear. You retrace your step a little bit, like where'd it go? Where did I lose it? Oh, I lost it around here. I didn't feel it after this point. Follow the scent. Now, here is a really important thing to pay attention to, and it's why I'm emphasizing following the scent. We are paralyzed without some partnering between these two parts of the brain. In other words, my brain, I'm not even asking the question, should I walk there or take a motorbike? I'm jumping, I'm following the scent, but I'm jumping to any number of conclusions that help me feel safe to move in that spatial arena. Because in this spatial part of the brain, there are all kinds of weird quirks. It's a very looping thing. So joy might come within about an inch of aching agony, and then it's not linearly logical. And so we're terrified on an instinctive level of this spatial part of the brain. It's one of the reasons we stay out of it and we're terrified of it. It's like we could be absolutely in joy and ecstasy, and then we don't follow the scent of joy. We do something logical, for example, but rather than being logical, we just step right over into agony over here, or depression or something. It's like, how do we end up? You're in a spatial part of the brain where it's not organized linearly. It's not like there's a 1 to 10 scale here with depression and misery here, and on the opposite end there's joy. It's much more like a computer where the bits and pieces of agony might be stored right next to the file that is here, because the computer may be organizing it alphabetically, or it may be, and joy and agony are closer together than joy and freedom on the alphabet, or whatever it is. So it has its own organizing system. So we're afraid of this. So we piece things together. But if we piece logic together, plus, equals, plus, etc., and pay attention, we have things like this coming. Our brain, we're trying to walk towards the door. Our brain quickly goes to why the hell am I going towards the door? Am I trying to run that errand I'm supposed to run? Is that what this is about? It's trying to jump to known values and known labels to rescue us from the exposure to the unknown of the unknown, which we try to avoid. It's a great arena to explore, but we try to avoid it. So let's say we hit on something that has a bit of the scent. Like, okay, we're going to go out and buy some soap and lime. Okay, so that's what we're doing. And you're following the scent towards the soap and lime. It does not mean that the scent is going to take us all the way to the store to buy soap and lime, and then all the way back with the soap and lime. Rather, see it as a stepping stone, so that the stepping stone is the idea of soap and lime that's heading like warmer. It's kind of like the warmer, colder game, where you're hitting the pot, warmer, colder, and you head like, is it this way? And you say, warmer, and you think, oh, it's in the chest. But it's not in the chest, it's behind the chest. But the idea that it's in the chest is taking you warmer. If you can grasp that kind of a little bit of a abstract distinction there, you think you're heading for this errand. You get to the point of the errand, and you check in again. is it warmer to go in and do that errand? It's like, no. It's warmer to carry on driving past this store that we thought was the destination, but we're going past it. Now where we're going, now our brain makes up a new story, like, are we going to Kata Beach? Are we going to this? And we find a label that's warmer, so we're going in the right direction. We head there. We get halfway there, which we didn't have a label for, and we lose the scent. So we stop, we go back. And it's like, is there anything here I need to do? Is there a flower I need to pick? Is there a ritual I need to do? Is there a thought I need to have? Is there an emotion I need to feel in this that is accessible from this location? Now, if you look at this through a spatial logic, you can also see that every point in space and time has a perspective. Now, it of course has a physical perspective. You're able to see something from each space in a different light. Literally, the light is always changing through time, so in a different light. And your brain is connecting dots that you don't even fully understand. You know, for example, let's create a little hypothesis here. So let's say you need to touch a certain emotion in a certain way from a certain angle in order to release it. And your subconscious and or spatial brain knows the recipe for that. But you don't even know what the memory is because you've forgotten it. And it's kind of unraveling it for you. And so it knows that when you were 3 years old, there was a white flower. And that was a trigger point. And then there was this smell. And then there was this. And if you recreate that pattern, it may come to light in a really elegant way that you, and again, would take years of therapy and stuff to sort out on your own, or to even know it was important. So you're heading around in this seeming craziness, but you're following the scent of spatial intelligence. You get to this unnamed point, and you don't even know what it is. But maybe it has something to do with that white flower. If I go closer to the white flower, do I get closer to the scent? No, it's not that. You just fumble around. Inefficiently, intuitively fumble around. When you've done whatever it is that you've come there to do, if you can figure it out, if it's anything at all, you start heading back following the scent. When you get to, you think you know you're going over to here, maybe you get to this point and you pause. If you don't know what it is, maybe you just sit there and have some thoughts and feelings. I can't tell you how liberating it is and how expansive it is to be in these moments of uncertainty and pause and have the logical brain go into a panic, which it does. Like, oh my God, I'm completely off my rockers. I mean, what am I doing here? I'm not even at a store. I'm not even at a location. I'm just sitting here by the side of the road, and I have no idea when I'm going to go somewhere else, or where I'm going to go, or why I'm here, or why I'm going to go. This is nuts. So it has its little fit. You let it have its fit. You stay present for the scent. Ah, okay. That was the thought. Okay, I'm going to mull on that thought while I continue this way. Maybe you continue in the direction you were going before you paused to have the thought and the panic, fit from the logical brain. Maybe that was the whole point, to have the panic fit. That needed to happen before a humor and a humility comes in. Because what happens is, like you can go from panic fit to laughter at the logical brain's tyranny over our lives. And you can see on the other side of a panic fit stuff that you could never see when you buy into the panic fit to such an extent that you don't even allow the humility for there being another way, let alone looking at it, let alone evaluating it, let alone putting it into practice. And so we move through the spatial brain in this way, moment by moment, humble to the vast multiverse of dimension, possibility, awareness, thought, and feeling. Humble. Humble just means present to all that is truly possible, which is much bigger than our logical brain will allow. Our logical brain is a very narrow, focused brain that's very useful for getting certain predictable mechanical things done in certain ways, and is atrocious at taking great leaps of intuition into whole new states of being, learning, and knowing. The whole point of logic is self-referencing, and it always likes to start with the idea that it already knows pretty much what the end is going to be. It just needs to fill in a few details, as opposed to it has no idea what 99% of the multiverse is, why it is, when it'll happen, when it'll change. And so there's this continual arrogant dance of the logical brain saying it knows everything, then something coming along that it finally has to acknowledge it doesn't know. Then by that time it's started to figure out what that is. Then it figures out what that is and says, now I still know everything. It's just now includes this and this, and of course I didn't know that because of the, and it's back to its know-it-all position. It's just a very narrow beam focus. Now, when we can humor our logical brain, when we can be as patronizing to it as it is to our spatial brain, we have a balance. We can say, cool it, logical brain, you have no logical explanation for what I'm trying to do. So back off. Give me a couple of hours to utilize the other 50% of my employees that I'm paying for. That's not logical. And I'm gonna learn from this. So this is basically the system, and you do this system until your time's up. 7, see where it's got you. See where it's got you. How are you feeling? How are you thinking? What are you feeling? What are you thinking? What have you learned? Where are you? And how will your reality be different going forward as a result of this path? Now, it's not necessarily like in my own experience, I'm experiencing, other than the regular little fits my logical brain has, I experience substantial increase in well-being and substantial decrease in stress, which I like. So that's my clear experience. And it's a great joy, as someone who is very competent in logic and has relied on it heavily, it is a great joy to explore the limitations of logic. And so I love it. I'm also humble that it's not necessarily going to be a direct up for everyone. So I'm putting this out as an experiment for data gathering so that we can see, if 100 people do this for a day and 85% of people experience insights and gestalts and fun and pleasure, and 15% of people get depressed and terrified. Well, that's good data to get. But I think it's important to know if that is the case. Are you one of the depressed, terrified people, or are you one of the people with the gestalts? Because if it opens something up for you in a powerful way and you learn to use this part of your brain as an ally, it's potentially a game changer. If it doesn't, then rather than watching, 8 hours of TV or whatever, you've spent 8 hours doing science, doing brain mapping, and taking a calculated risk that has a pretty high upside and, a not too expensive downside. So good luck, and I'd love to hear from you.